Once again, brothers and sisters, it is good to be with you, and all praises to the Most High. I'm your host, the Apostle Reuben of IUPR Bible Radio, podcasting out of Little Rock, Arkansas, to the true saints of the Most High God. Now, brothers and sisters, we're in Romans 1:13. We're going to read on down to a specific spot. Now, getting ready really soon to go into the Gentiles grafted in. I have not done Gentiles grafted in 3 years. I already have a series on it, but I'm going to try to put it together in one teaching this time. And it will be coming up soon. But before we get into the Gentiles grafted in and who they really were, we have to understand the concept of the Gentile. We have to. Because these Christians, they are deceiving people on what Gentile means. Now again, we're at Romans 1:13. Before we go, we're going to go here. Now, Gentile is very important. Very, very important, brothers and sisters. You pay close attention. Gentile, we're reading this once again. We're reading actually both of them. We're going to take a look at this one and this one. But for right now, we're going to look at this one. It says, again, Gentile. The Hebrews call the Gentiles by the general name of Goyim, which signifies the nations that have not received the faith or the law of God. All who are not Jews and circumcised. So, all who are not Jews and not circumcised. That's why it says not Jews and circumcised. So what this is saying is, if you're not a Jew or you're not circumcised are all comprised under the word Goyim. So once again, brothers and sisters, Goyim, which is Gentile, applied to the uncircumcision. They're telling you here in this definition. They're telling you here that if you were not circumcised, all who are not Jews and circumcised, if you're not a Jew or you're not circumcised, you were comprised under the word Gentile, Goyim. Those who were converted, which were the Jews that were converted, and we're going to prove that, and embraced Judaism, they call proselytes. Now, again, what we want you to see is that if you are not a Jew, now because see, it's all in how it's worded. It's all in how it's worded. We've been teaching this for a long time. The Christians, they have specific ways of wording things. Because if you notice, it says, the Hebrews call the Gentiles by the general name of Goyim, which signifies the nations that have not received the faith or the law of God. All who are not Jews. See, that's what they want you to see first. All who are not Jews. They want you to define Gentile as non-Jew. And like I say, brothers and sisters, these little complete concordances, they have their demons, no matter how old they are. It's the perception. The first thing they want you to see, which is the Edomites, the Edomite Christians, the first thing they want you to see is non-Jew. That's what a Gentile is, but it also means uncircumcision. That's why it says all who are not Jews and circumcised. So if you're not a Jew or you're not circumcised, are comprised under the word Goyim. Again, the uncircumcision was a Gentile. From this book here, Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary. Brothers and sisters, this isn't hard. Open it. Look. You got to take your studies further. Uncircumcised. One who is not submitted to the Judean, because I don't like saying Jewish. I hate saying Jewish. But one who has not submitted to the Judean rite of circumcision. Gentiles. There it is again. Here it is again. Uncircumcised was the Gentile. Now, I want you to take a look at this. Uncircumcised. Let's do this. I want to drop down to here. Now, I done a Google search, and I already knew this, but I wanted to present this to you, brothers and sisters. I typed in the Grecian king who stopped circumcision during the time of Daniel. And this is what they gave me. The Grecian king who stopped circumcision during the time of Daniel was Antiochus or Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Details about Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He was a Seleucid ruler of Syria and Israel from 175 to 163 BC. He is considered by many scholars to be the little horn referred to in the book of Daniel, who would attack and persecute the Jewish people. He outlawed the Jewish religion. I just hate to say that, but I got to read it right. Including circumcision. Oh. So the people on the left, which are the Caucasians, which are the Edomites, they did this. They had a God that looks like them because of the depiction of Alexander the Great to Antiochus could easily be any one of these pictures. They like to make him different. The point is, it's the people. John Hagee descends from these people. Joel Osteen descends from these people. These people you're looking at stopped the Judean circumcision. Now let's read that because we got to come back to it. Let's go and read it. The book of Daniel. Let's go and read this. Daniel chapter 8. We're going to get straight to the point. We're going to start in verse 9. The book of Daniel chapter 8. Just start reading verse 9. It says, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, out of one of the four generals, four places, the four powers, the four winds, forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. The pleasant land is Israel. I want you to pay attention. And it, which is the little horn, waxed great, even unto the host of heaven. The host of heaven means he was ruler. He was a ruler. He had dominion. He was the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground. What does that mean? Some of the host and some of the stars. Who are these stars that he cast down to the ground? See, this is letting you know Daniel wrote it in a parable form, but if we're looking at, remember Genesis, who are these stars? Genesis 37. Because he didn't cast no real star to the ground. This is a parable, folks. Genesis 37:9, and he dreamed yet another dream and told it his brethren and said, behold, I dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I, which is the sun, and thy mother, which is the moon, and thy brethren, which were the stars, indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? They end up doing it, but what we wanted you to see was that the stars he was talking about in verse 9 were his siblings, his brothers. When he says the 11 stars, that means Joseph was the 12th. So the stars were Israelites. This is common knowledge. Common knowledge. So when you go back to Daniel, look at Daniel, chapter 8. Now, brothers and sisters, I'm taking it easy on you today. Going to take it easy, but it's not going to be that easy. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. What do you think this is? This is war. He defeats them in war. Watch. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. The prince of the host is the priest. That's who the prince is, based off, because I can show you who the prince is. The prince is, let's go to Isaiah. Let's look at this prince. He says, I'm just going to get to the point. What's this prince? It says, therefore I have profaned the princes of the sanctuary. See, the princes of the sanctuary. Why? Because we had sinned against him. What did he do? Therefore I have profaned the princes of the sanctuary. See, the sanctuary had princes. That's who the princes were. Those Levitical priests of the sanctuary, and have given Jacob to the curse and Israel to reproaches. One of the curses he gave them to is the Grecian captivity. But let's go back. I just wanted to show you that the prince was of the sanctuary. Daniel chapter 8. Watch this. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. That's the priest. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. They stopped sacrifice. And the place of his sanctuary, prince sanctuary, you see, we read that in Isaiah 42:28. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. They stopped sacrifice. But watch. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice. What is the host? The prince. The priest turned on the law. They went and made a league with the Grecian king. You got to pay attention. These Jews these priests turned, these Jews that were in authority, along with the priests, they turned their backs against their own law and went to the Grecian fashion. It says it here. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, by reason of their transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. What was the truth that was cast down to the ground? What was the truth? What was the truth that was cast down? What was the truth? Churches won't define this. What was the truth that was cast down to the ground? Come on now. We got to, come on now. Psalms 119, verse 142. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. That is what the truth is. When they cast the truth down to the ground, they cast the law to the ground. Verse 151. Thou art near, O Lord, and all thy commandments, all his laws, commandments, statutes are truth. That's what the truth is, folks. The law was the truth. The law was the truth. So when we go back and we go to Daniel. Just reading this one verse again. Daniel chapter 8. Verse 12. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the law to the ground. This is when they stopped uncircumcision. This is when the Greeks, through Antiochus Epiphanes, stopped the Jews from being circumcised. He stopped the Jews. He stopped the Jews from being circumcised. Let's go back again. We're going to back on up. Watch this. It says details about Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Right below it. He was a Seleucid ruler of Syria and Israel from 175 to 163 BC. He is considered by many scholars to be the little horn. They know who he is. Referred to in the book of Daniel. We just read it. Who would attack and persecute the Jewish people, cast some of the stars down to the ground. These people know their history. Watch. He outlawed the Jewish religion. He outlawed the Judean religion. I'm trying to read it as Jewish, brothers and sisters, for the cause, but I just can't stay. It doesn't. Yeah. He outlawed the Judean religion. This Caucasian, these people did this. They outlawed the Judean religion, including circumcision. He cast the truth down to the ground. So he stopped circumcision and killed many Jews because only the Jews were involved in circumcision with a few northern kingdom that was around them. All Israel came out of captivity up under the Median and Persian Empire. Cyrus the king, when he let them go, Darius, when he let them go, all Israel came out. That's Ezra 2 and 70. All Israel, all tribes. It's all through Ezra and Nehemiah. But what we're showing you, what we are showing you, brothers and sisters, he outlawed the Jewish religion, including circumcision. He stopped the Jews from circumcising their kids. But the Jews never stopped having kids. So if you stop circumcision and continue to have kids, how many of those children are going to be uncircumcised? See, this is what the Christians don't want. This right here. It's why we say that Christianity is a supremacist religion based upon thought. Think like us. Do like us. If you don't, you are a hater. If you don't, you are a problem. And many, and I tell you, brothers and sisters, many, and it hurts to death to see our black pastors. Oh, these black pastors in the politics and the football games back, all these people, they searched to find that dollar. They found out they could use God to get money. Don't have to teach. It's all about the gift. It's all about this and this. And live these lavish lives. All for a lie. It's crazy how it is. You mean to tell me none of them could have studied this? Yeah, to be surprised, brothers and sisters, they should know. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. Who did the transgression? The host. Those hosts were the rulers in Judea. That's what the host. The host was them. They turned on their own law. That was transgression to them and cast down the truth to the ground. They cast down the law to the ground. That was the truth, the law. And it practiced and prospered. They left. So what you have to understand is when we go back down to, it says he was a Seleucid ruler of Syria and Israel from 175 to 163 BC, he is considered considered by many scholars to be the little horn referred to in the book of Daniel, who would attack and persecute the Judean people. He outlawed the Judean religion, including circumcision. He stopped circumcision, meaning, once again, there are uncircumcised Jews in the time of Christ. That's why. Once again, brothers and sisters, we can tell you in the book of Acts, chapter 15, verse 1. And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren, and said, except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved. The brethren that they're talking to are the uncircumcised Jews among the nations, because Antiochus and Epiphanes stopped circumcision. So there was millions of uncircumcised Jews. Millions. Christians try to overstep this little information, but it's a fact. Circumcision was stopped by the Edomites. And I keep wondering to myself, if these Edomites stopped circumcision, this means they were not a part of the law. This is a fact. If they stopped the law, they wasn't part of it. I'm going to read the bottom one again, the third one on the bottom. He outlawed the Judean religion, stopped them from keeping the Sabbath, the holy days, all of that, including circumcision. They could not. He would not let them circumcise their little boys. So all these little boys that are being born among the kingdom of the Grecians, among the kingdom of the Grecians, all these little boys that are uncircumcised makes them the uncircumcision. That's why, again, brothers, that's why Paul made it clear in the book of Romans. The book of Romans, chapter 2. Paul made it clear. The book of Romans, chapter 2. Verse 25. We're going to just start reading down. I want to get to a certain point. For circumcision, that's the Jew, right? Verily profiteth, if thou keep the law. But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. Uncircumcision. So let me ask you something, brothers and sisters. What is Paul talking about? If I could ask you, what does he mean by this? If you could give me your opinion, what do you think he meant? If circumcision profiteth, if they keep the law, but if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. What do you think he's talking about? He's going into flesh and the heart. He's going into the flesh and the heart. Because when you look again, for circumcision verily profiteth, if thou keep the law. So their circumcision of the flesh will profit them if you keep it. If you keep the law, your circumcision matters. But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision which is in the flesh is made uncircumcision of the heart. You can't uncircumcise a man in his sew the foreskin back on him. Be real. The uncircumcision is talking about the heart. That's why when we read down, therefore, if the uncircumcision, now he's talking about the uncircumcision. Keep the righteousness of the law. So if the uncircumcision, which is of the flesh, the uncircumcision, keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision in his flesh be counted for circumcision of the heart? Paul's been talking about the heart. Y'all think you got to get down to Romans 229 where they try to make a doctrine out of it. No, he's talking about the circumcision of the heart here. Right here. Therefore, if the uncircumcision which is in the flesh, whose uncircumcision? Which uncircumcision? You're going to find out. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision which is in his flesh be counted for circumcision of the heart? So the circumcision of the heart is in keeping the righteousness of the law. So your heart is circumcised, keeping the righteousness of the law. That's how your heart is circumcised. You keep the law, your heart circumcised. This is why they skip this part. They want to drop down to verse 28, 29. No, 26, 27, 28, and 29. Let's do it right. No, we do it our way. But watch this. And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, Paul says, if it fulfill. Notice the word fulfill. This is why can't pay attention to these Christians. You see, if it fulfill, Paul just says, if it fulfill the law, judge thee. If the uncircumcision which is of the flesh, if the uncircumcision which is of the flesh, down to the bottom one again. Down to the bottom one, the third one. He outlawed the Judean religion, including circumcision. That means there were a lot of uncircumcised Jews. So when we go back, wait a minute. These uncircumcised Jews scattered among the Grecians and Romans. And shall not the uncircumcision, who's uncircumcision? Jews. The ones Antiochus and Epiphanes stopped from being circumcised. Hundreds of years this went on. At least nearly 2. All these Jews being born and uncircumcised. Come on now. And shall not the uncircumcision, these are the Jews uncircumcised, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by the letter and circumcision doth transgress the law? See, you have the letter and you're circumcised and you break the law. That's a shame. You got the circumcision of the flesh and the letter, the Bible, the Old Testament writings, and you break it. For he is not a Jew, which is one. Stop. This just lets you know, brothers and sisters, the uncircumcision he was talking about was the Jew. The uncircumcised Jew among Rome, among Greece, among all the provinces they had among themselves, the Edomites. Notice, for he is not a Jew, what do we mean? This is when they make up the spiritual Jew. No, Paul all this time, when he says, and shall not the uncircumcision, and shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by the letter and circumcision does transgress the law. So he's talking about the uncircumcision. Remember, shall not the uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by the letter and circumcision does transgress the law. So he's talking about this uncircumcision. And shall not the uncircumcision. But watch this. Why? He continues. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. This uncircumcision is not a Jew outwardly. Neither is that circumcision which is of the outward, which is outward in the flesh. Let me read that over. I butchered it. For he is not a Jew. We were talking about all this time. What is for he is not a Jew have anything to do with the uncircumcision? Put these two things together, brothers and sisters. We have got to put these things together. Start thinking. Christianity is a perception. Supremacy. Think like us. No, we can't do that. He says in Romans 2:27, and shall not the uncircumcision. Who's uncircumcision? You're going to find out in the next verse. For he is not a Jew. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Outwardly means he's uncircumcised in the outer flesh. This Jew is not circumcised in the outer flesh. Yes, yes, yes. Do you understand? The Jews were the uncircumcision. He's telling you here, for he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, meaning his foreskin has not been cut. So this Jew's foreskin has not been cut. This Jew's foreskin has not been cut. He's the uncircumcision. That's what we want you to see. That's why Paul goes down and says, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly. He's a Jew. Watch this. And circumcision is that of the heart. What was the circumcision? How would your heart be circumcised? We're going to stop right there first. How did you get circumcision of the heart? See, the Christians, how did you get the circumcision of the heart? How? How was your heart circumcised? Let's go back up. Let's go back up to verse 26. Therefore, if the uncircumcision which is of the flesh keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision in the flesh be counted for circumcision of the heart? That is how your heart was circumcised, through the righteousness of the law. There it is. There it is, you Christians. We defined it. Your heart is circumcised. That's why it says, therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision in his flesh be counted for circumcision of the heart? Because that is what the righteousness of the law presents to us. If the uncircumcision in the flesh keep the righteousness of the law, Paul says, shall not their uncircumcision in their flesh be counted for circumcision of what? The heart. They don't have to have their foreskin cut. If they keep the law, their heart circumcised. That's why when this is when you get down here, now all of a sudden there's something new. No, but he is a Jew, because this Jew, look, for he is not a Jew which is one outwardly. This Jew has not been circumcised. Neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. This Jew was not circumcised in his flesh, meaning he was the uncircumcision. And look who it is, the Romans. So these are the strangers in Rome, like it says in Acts 2 and 10. Come on now. Hey, put the chapter and verse on the board. The people need to see. They can read. Right here proves that the Jews were uncircumcised in the flesh. That's why it says in Acts 15 and 1 once again. Acts 15 and 1. And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren. Their brethren were Jews. The Jew that was uncircumcised, along with sprinkles of northern kingdom. Northern kingdom was too. It plays a part in Romans 11. We're going to go over all this. I may have to do it in two parts, man. It's going to be long. But certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren. The brethren were Jews and other Israelites scattered in other nations, and said, except you be circumcised after the manner of Moses, which is by the knife, you cannot be saved. That is not true. That is not true. That doctrine is not true at all. But what we want to look at is the Judeans taught their brethren and said, except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, which is by the knife, meaning that there were uncircumcised Israelites among the nations. They can't do anything about that. That's apparent. Romans 2 again. That's why Romans 2. Even before that, I want to go back to the book of Acts, chapter, I think 21. Let me see. Acts 21. Because they were here it is. I think we're going to read Acts 21, 20 and 21. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe. Also, there were a lot of Jews that believed. And they are all zealous to the law. So when they were believers, they were zealous to the law. A believer was zealous to the law. You can't take law out of belief. We don't know what you Christians, man. But watch this. And they are informed of thee that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses. You're teaching all the Jews to forsake Moses. The Jews among the Gentiles. The Jews among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying they ought not to circumcise. So they're teaching circumcision. Look, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither walk after the customs. So what are these Jews teaching? They're teaching circumcision and the customs to the Jews among the Gentiles. Again, meaning there were uncircumcised Israelites among the Gentiles. Primarily Jews. So these were uncircumcised Jews among the Gentiles. We keep telling you how far back uncircumcision, the stopping of circumcision goes. It's important you know. Antiochus Epiphanes stopped circumcision. You can look this up anywhere and it's going to tell you the same thing. Esau stopped circumcision, making a lot of the Jews, primarily and a few sprinkle of northern kingdom, uncircumcised. That is what we're trying to get you to see. That's why back in the Romans, Romans chapter 2. We got to get to the bottom of this. That's why it says, for he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. He hasn't been circumcised by his flesh, making him the uncircumcision. Neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. He has not been circumcised, making this Jew the uncircumcision by the flesh. Now that is what the Jews were trying to get other Jews that were uncircumcised to do. Circumcise your flesh and offer offerings in the temple. That is what those Jews were teaching because they didn't believe in Christ. So we're trying to get you to see that the Jews are also the uncircumcision Paul is talking about. That's why he says, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly. Inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart. He keeps the law in the spirit and not in the letter. The letter was what? Think about it. The circumcision of the heart, once again, the circumcision of the heart come from what? Let's look up. Let's go right this. Therefore, if the uncircumcision that's in the flesh keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision which is in his flesh be counted for circumcision of the what? What could be counted for circumcision of the what? The heart. So if he keep the righteousness of the law, the circumcision that counts. That's why it says be counted for circumcision. If he keep the righteousness of the law, his uncircumcision is automatically counted for circumcision of the heart. By keeping the law, his heart is circumcised. That's how. So when we go back down, if we go back down to verse 29, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly. And circumcision is that of the heart. What circumcises your heart? Keeping the righteousness of the law in verse 26. And in the spirit, in the spirit, and not in the letter, not by the sacrifice. That's the letter. The letter was the sacrifice, whose praise is not of men, priests, Pharisees, Sadducees, but of God. So the things you really have to understand, brothers and sisters, that when it comes down to the uncircumcised, one who is not submitted to the Judean rite of circumcision, Gentiles. Notice, I'm going to take you over this again. Heathen is the same as Gentile. Now, we're going to look at heathen. It says usually, which means not all the time, used for a non-Israelitish people, thus have the meaning of Gentiles. Notice, heathen Gentiles are people, nation, but the uncircumcised, they don't list them as a people or a nation, which means they could be anybody. You Christians are finished. The uncircumcision wasn't anybody. What wasn't any nation that we could just point to. The uncircumcision is anybody that have not submitted to the Judean rite of circumcision, meaning Jews that were scattered, northern kingdom that were scattered among heathen that were uncircumcised were also heathen. Now, let's take a look at the trickery of Christianity. Let's take a look at the trickery. We're going to go back here. Now, I'm reading this again for a reason. Now, this comes out of my Gruden's Complete Concordance, but we're going to go down. We're going to go down to the bottom part, the bottom paragraph. The bottom paragraph. It says, the Apostle Paul generally includes all Gentiles under the name of Greeks. Now, again, all Gentiles is the Negro, the Caucasian, the Arabian, the Chinese, the Japanese, the people from India, anybody. All Gentiles are Greeks. You know why? Because that's all you see. Jew, Greek, Jew, Greek, Jew, Greek, Jew, Greek. That's it. All you see is the Jew and the Greek. You don't see the African. You don't see the Moabite. You don't see the Ammonite. You don't see the Jebusite, the Hittite, the Pezerite. You don't see no other ite. All you see is the Jew and the Greek. The Jew and the Greek. So let's look at this. Let's go back to Romans chapter 1. Romans 1, and we're going to start in verse 13 like we had up on the screen at first. Romans 1, verse 13. Now I would not have you ignorant, brethren. There's that brethren again. Paul's brethren, kinsmen according to the flesh, Romans 9, 3 and 4. So these are the Jews in Rome. That oftentimes I purposed to come unto you, but was let hitherto, that I might have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. So, see, Gentiles. Now, watch what Paul calls the Gentiles. Watch what he calls them in verse 14. It says, I am a debtor both to the Greeks and to the barbarians, both to the wise, which are law keepers, and to the unwise, which are sinners. Now, look at this. So, as much as in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also. Who is at Rome? Those Jews. But watch this. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. So here is when they said, bottom paragraph, the Apostle Paul generally includes all Gentiles under the name of Greeks. Romans 1:16. Did you see that happen? When you go back and look at this verse, where does he declare all? You know how we're going to show you what they're talking about. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone. There it is. Everyone equivalates to what? All Gentiles. Everyone equivalates to all Gentiles that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. But that is not what that means. That's a lie. That's a lie. if this is how, again, they included Negroes and all other races into their salvation. See, and this is also what we mean, brothers and sisters, is they also had to make themselves the Jews. The Caucasians interact with the whole Bible as their race and not to the Negro. This is how they did it. But I want you to look at this. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. So everyone is a Greek now. We're all Greeks. That's what they're saying. But let's look at the Bible. We're going to it again, the book of Colossians. I want you to pay close attention to this. Colossians 3. Colossians 3, because I want you to get set in this. Colossians 3, verse 10 again. And have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision. That's the Greek. The Greek is the uncircumcision. The uncircumcision of who? You got to think. You got to think. Who is this uncircumcision? That is the Greek. Who is this uncircumcision which is of the Greek? It begins to come together after a few verses. It begins to come together. Paul did not, when that everyone did not equal to all nations. Paul wrote here in Colossians 3 that the Greek was the uncircumcision. That was the Greek to him. It didn't plate any color, any nation. It was the uncircumcision. And see, what happens is we start putting two and two together. Down at the bottom, I'll read, he was the Seleucid ruler of Syria and Israel from 175 to 163 BC. He is considered by many scholars to be the little horn referred to in the book of Daniel, who would attack and persecute the Judean people. So he brought war to the Judean people. We saw it. He outlawed the Judean religion. No more feasts, no more Sabbaths, including circumcision. Boom. There it is. That's the missing link. There are a lot of uncircumcised Jews out there. Out there. And see, this is one of the things that a lot of people can just look over. But we're not going to look over it. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision, which is the Jew, uncircumcision, which is the Greek. So the Greek is the uncircumcision. The Greek is the uncircumcision. That government. Uncircumcised, one who is not submitted to the Judean rite of circumcision. Gentiles, that means anybody that was not circumcised of his flesh was a Gentile. Over and over again, there's no place. We can go in any book. We're going to start in the middle. All who are not Jews and circumcised. So if you're not a Jew and you're not circumcised, are comprised under the word goyim, Gentiles. Proof, proof, proof. So the uncircumcision of the Jews, they were Gentiles. We're telling you what this say. We're telling you what the books say. Look at, don't worry about the Christian. Worry about what the book. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision, which is the Jew, nor uncircumcision, which is the Greek, meaning anybody that was uncircumcised, including the uncircumcised Jews, was the uncircumcision. And Paul called them the Greek. That's why, again, when we go back, remember, I want to go to Hellenists. Books, research, Hellenists, Jews who made Greek their tongue, and with it often adopted Greek ideas and practices. The ideas and practices is worshiping their gods. The ideas and practices is not being circumcised. So they know that the Hellenists were Jews who were among the Greeks, worshiping the God of the Greeks, speaking Grecian language. Jews who made Greek their tongue, and with it often adopted Greek ideas and practices. But let me show you the Hellenists, right? So, I have a guy listen to me. He'll bring back up. I don't know how long people have been listening, but we sure thank you, brothers and sisters. It's good to have long-term listeners because we don't pressure you, not at all. But Deuteronomy 16:16, all we do is read. Now, there's a history to this. Now, we're going to read this again. Deuteronomy 16:16. 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread. That's the Passover. So the place that the Lord chose was Jerusalem. We're just letting you know that now. And the Feast of Weeks, which is the Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles, which is the 7th day to the 8th day delight. Best time that I ever had in my life, brothers and sisters, the Feast of Tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty. So 3 times in a year, they had to go to Jerusalem to worship. Well, where would they be? Wherever they were. Wherever they were, 3 times a year, they had to go to Jerusalem and worship. One was unleavened bread, the Feast of Weeks, which is the Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. So let's get an instance here. Let's go to the book of John 12. I just want to let you see this, John 12, verse 1. Then 6 days before the Passover. See? Then the Messiah 6 days before the Passover came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. I just wanted to show you. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with them. So we're talking about this here. Let's drop down to I want to see if I can get. Let's get to the point. John 12:19. And the Pharisee therefore said among themselves, perceive ye how he prevailed nothing. Behold, the world is gone after him. You see that world? That's that you know that the world is Israel. All nations didn't go after Christ. Christ came into his own. Christ came. How could all nations go after Christ when we remember? We got 2 verses that'll prove that to be. Look at this. The book of John, chapter 1, verse 11. He came into his own. Stop. See, when his own that received him not, that was already told in Mark 8:31. He will be rejected of the chief priests, scribes, and Pharisees. But in Acts 21:20, we had many Jews believe. So they wasn't rejecting him. Come on now, follow up. He came into his own. Christ didn't come to everybody. He came unto his own people. He didn't come for the world, all the nations. Look at this. John 13:1, now before the feast of the Passover, when the Messiah knew his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world was Rome, unto the Father, having loved his own. Oh, Christ was sent for his own, and he only loved his own, which were in the world. He loved them unto the end. Christ did not love all nations upon going back to the Father from the crucifixion of Rome. He loved his own. Boom. So when we look, this is what we want to do. Let you know about that world. You got to think. The Pharisee therefore said among themselves, perceive ye how ye prevail nothing? Behold, the world is gone after him. And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. Certain Greeks. Certain Greeks. Not all Greeks. There were certain Greeks that came up to worship. When were they commanded to go to Jerusalem and worship? The Passover. And that's what this is. The Passover. And I'm being honest. Wherever Israelites were, Deuteronomy 16:16, they were commanded to come from wherever they were to Jerusalem and keep the Passover, the Pentecost, and the tabernacle. So now you're seeing an instance. And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. What Greeks were these? Who are these Greeks? Who? Let's read the top. Greece. Grecia is Greece, the home of the Hellenes. What we read at the bottom. Hellenes, Greeks, and Grecians, however, are to be distinguished. Greeks are generally those of Hellenic race. The Hellenic race are the Jews. The Hellenic race are the Jews. Acts 16:1, Acts 18:4. We're going to go to Acts 18:4. They know. And probably John 12:20, which we are reading now. It's not probably John 12. That's why when you look, hold on. And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. Who are these Greeks? Back down. Look at this. It says, let me start over. Grecia is Greece, home of the Hellenists. Greeks and Grecians, however, are to be distinguished. Greeks are generally those of Hellenic race. The Hellenic race that were Greeks were the Jews at the bottom. They're letting you know that those Jews that were among Esau were also called Greeks. Greeks are generally those of Hellenic race. Acts 16:1, Acts 18:4, and probably, not probably, it was John 12:20, which we are reading now. But the word may be used to indicate non-Jews. The non-Jew is him, the one that stopped circumcision. He is the non-Jew. You guys have got to see this. He's the non-Jew. These people know they're not the Jews. They know. They know. But the word may be used to indicate non-Jews, foreigners, and aliens. Romans 1:16. No, see, they equate all Gentiles. There it is again. Romans 1:16. Foreigners and aliens. That's all of them. But watch this. Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews, folks of the dispersion, thus dispersed among them. Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews. Greek-speaking Jews. Greek-speaking Jews. Let's watch this. Greek-speaking Jews. We're going to come back. John 19. John 19. Verse 19. And Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross. And the writing was, the Messiah of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. This title then read many of the Jews, many, because the only ones that were at the Passover was who was commanded to come, and those were Jews. That's why it says, this title then read many of the Jews. There were no other nations there. They were not commanded to come. Only Jews were. For the place where the Messiah was crucified was nigh to the city. And it was written in Hebrew and Greek. Hebrew and Greek and Latin. Pay attention. Many of the Jews that were there, it was written in Hebrew and Greek. Hebrew and Greek. Hebrew. Grecia is Greece, the home of the Hellenists. Greeks and Grecians, however, are to be distinguished. Greeks are generally those of Hellenic race. These are the Jews that are Greeks. But the word may be used to indicate the non-Jews, foreigners and aliens, these people. Right here. The ones that's destroying the temple and the law. Let's go back. No, I don't want to go back. I want to go back here. It says, but the word may be used to indicate non-Jews, foreigners, and aliens. Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews, folk of the dispersion, from areas predominantly Greek. They know that these Jews that were among Grecians, or what they call the Greeks, the Jews among the Greeks were Greeks too. They were Greeks as well. That's why it was written. That's why it was written. This title then read many of the Jews. For the place where the Messiah was crucified was nigh to the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Greek, because there were Jews there that spoke Greek and came from Greece to go to the Passover as commanded. Latin is Rome. So these Greeks, and there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast, these Greeks were the Hellenist Greeks. Those were those Jews that were dispersed among the Grecian kingdom. They were also Greeks. That's why it says, let me look at this, and I think it's the book of Acts. Paul was being a Jew. Watch this. Watch this. Just getting to the point. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, canst thou speak Greek? Paul could speak Greek. He was an Israelite that spoke Greek. Watch this. Canst thou speak Greek? Watch this. Art not thou that Egyptian? Paul looked like an Egyptian, a son of Ham. You Christians, boy, I tell you. But when you're not there, you're not there. Which before these days made us an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers. But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus. So Paul, who said, canst thou speak Greek? Because Paul was a Jew that could speak Greek. He spoke the Grecian language, but he was a Jew, like many of the rest of them were. And a lot of you Christians think if Paul himself is telling you, but Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus. Paul knows his nationality. He knows he was a Jew. But when it came down to what he needed, Acts 22:25, and as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? Oh, who's the Roman? Who is the Roman? Watch this. And when the centurion heard that, he went and told the chief captain, saying, take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. But Paul was a Jew. See, he was a Jew born in the provinces of Rome, making him a Roman. That's why he said, then the chief captain came and said unto him, tell me, art thou a Roman? ? And he said, yeah, because Paul was a Roman. He was born in Rome, but he was a Jew by ethnicity and a citizenship of Rome. Like these Jews were, their ethnicity were Jews, but they were among the Greek provinces, born there, free, making them Greeks. That's why, again, these people knew it. The bottom, Hellenists, Jews who made Greek their tongue, and with it often adopted Greek ideas and practices. Now this was years after Greece had came and took the pleasant land and stopped the law. They were being born into the thousands, millions being uncircumcised. The uncircumcision. You cannot rename. I don't care how many verses I go to, brothers and sisters, I don't care how many verses I go to, I will not see non-Israelite or non-Jew in this book. I will not see non-Israelite or non-Jew in this book, because that is not the heading of a Gentile. The heading of a Gentile is nations, people, or uncircumcision. The books don't lie. It's just that no one investigates what they're reading. Gentile, reading in the middle, all who are not Jews and circumcised. So if you are not a Jew, that's what they want you to see, or not circumcised, are comprised under the word goyim. So the uncircumcision, which Antiochus Epiphanes, an Edomite, stopped. He stopped the Jews from being circumcised. You saw it. We looked it up. Meaning there was a lot of Jews uncircumcised. Heh, heh, heh. All who are not Jews and circumcised. So if you're not circumcised, you went under the name Goyim, which was Gentiles, according to this here. And again, uncircumcised, one who is not submitted to the Judean rite of circumcision, Gentile. See? And matching it up time and time again. Romans. Oh, that's the one I was looking at. Romans. Let's get the book of Romans. See, this is, you could go by, the Christians don't even listen to Paul, and they misjudge Paul. And it's not by accident, brothers and sisters. They know. Is he the God of the Jews only? Jews only, question mark. Is he not also of the Gentiles? Yes, of the Gentiles also. Paul is going to let you know which Gentiles he's talking about. Is he going to be talking about races of people or this? Seeing it is one God which shall justify the circumcision, which is the Jew, by faith, and the uncircumcision through faith. You can see that the uncircumcision is the Gentile. It's about what you see. The uncircumcision is the Gentile. These people don't lie. Says it here and here. All who are not Jews and not circumcised. So if you're not a Jew or you're not circumcised, you're comprised under the word goyim, which is Gentile. Uncircumcised, one who has not submitted to the Judean rite of circumcision. Gentiles, it's the same. It goes right into the Bible. They know it because of this. They know it because of this. Is he the God of the Jews only? Is he not also of the Gentiles? Yes, of the Gentiles also. Seeing, he continues on. Seeing it is one God which shall justify the circumcision, which is the Jew, by faith, and the uncircumcision, which is the Gentile, through faith. It's it's letting you know who the Gentiles are. They're the uncircumcision. You're not going to see non-Jew ever. Uncircumcision is what you're going to see. But they don't want you to know that, because you can go back and trace the history of Antiochus Epiphanes stopping circumcision of the Jews, making the Jews the uncircumcision also. The bottom one again, he outlawed the Judean religion, including circumcision. This Grecian king, this Edomite, stopped circumcision. So there was a lot of uncircumcised Israelites. It's not based off of non-Jew nation, all that. It's based off circumcision, uncircumcision, and killed many Jews who resisted his decrees. So if you circumcised your kids, if you kept the Sabbath and the feast, he'll kill you. This man right here would kill you. The Greek. Can't escape your past. Can't escape your past. Again, let's get a little order here. Paul says, wherefore remember that ye, the ye is who the letter was to, the saints in Ephesus. Remember therefore, wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh. He's going to point out who these Gentiles are. You will not see none Jew, you will not see none Israelite, but what you will see who are called uncircumcision. There you go. Pow. Pow. This is who Paul is talking about. The Christians, they're trying to throw the nations in there. No, Paul didn't. Paul let you know. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, because that is who the Gentiles were, the uncircumcision. But if you see that there are a lot of uncircumcised Jews, what would that make them? Oh, you finally got it, brothers and sisters. You finally got it. Finally got it. And then going back to Romans 1. See, Romans 1. Verse 16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to the power of God unto salvation to everyone. See, that everyone does not equal to all nations. He says everyone that believeth. He's going to tell you to the Jew first and also to the Greek. So it would be everyone that believeth, from who we see, the Jew and the Greek. It's not talking about the African. It's not talking about the Chinese, the Japanese, the ites, any of the ites. It's everyone that believeth, from the Jew and the Greek. Not all. All nations don't. Everyone does not equivalent to all nations, all people. Everyone that believeth, to the Jew and the Greek. So everyone that believeth, to who we see. The only two we see is the Jew and the Greek. So how does this equivalent to all nations being the Greek? No. And Paul never said that. Paul said in Colossians 3. Paul told you who these Greeks were according to him. He told you who these Greeks were. Colossians 3:11. Well, there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision, which is the Jew, nor uncircumcision, which is the Greek. The Greek was the uncircumcision Paul was talking about. Barbarian, Scythian, bond, nor free, but Christ is all and in all. So, the Greek. But notice, he separates barbarian. He doesn't say, look, when you see how they try to do it, commas is separate. Barbarians, Scythians, bond or free. He's making a point. He puts them in their own place. But the Greek was the uncircumcision. We're looking at who the Greek Paul is talking about. We're looking at the Greek Paul is talking about, and it is called the uncircumcision. And anybody could have been the uncircumcision, including the Israelites among the nations. This is what we're saying. So once you get back to little verses like these, this is what. Here's these little verses like this. When we go to the book of Galatians, chapter 2 and 2, and I went up by revelation and communicated unto them that gospel which I preached among the Gentiles, but privily to them which were of reputation. Those were the high ranks of reputation, as Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, different judges and rulers, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. But neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, now think, was compelled to be circumcised. Compelled to be circumcised. Why? Being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. Think, think, think. Think, think, think. Think, think, think. Let's go back to Colossians 3:11 one more time. This is why we say, brothers and sisters, you got to read it all. Watch what Paul calls the Greek. Well, there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision. So the Greek was the uncircumcision, not a race, not a people. He didn't make it. Look, what we're saying is, let me explain what I'm saying. We know that the Greeks were a people. They were a people. We know this. What we're saying is Paul does not list them as a people in his writings. He lists them under uncircumcision. So you don't know who he's talking about. We see it here. We didn't see that the Greek was the Edomite in the book. We know what we're reading. When we read Hellenes, Grecian Greece, the home of the Hellenes, Greeks and Grecians, however, are to be distinguished. Greeks are generally those of Hellenic race, Israelites. But the word may be used to indicate non-Jews, foreigners, the Caucasians, aliens. Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews, folk of the dispersion. They were scattered. So they knew that these Greeks were those Negroes. They knew it. They knew it. So when we get to places like this, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, you will always see this Greek as a Caucasian. That is what these black pastors are pushing. These weak, ignorant black pastors, they know that the first place a ignorant mind is going to go with this is white people. See, the whites can be saved. The East Edom can be saved too. See, it says the Greek, not understanding that the Greek was uncircumcision. Paul notes it as he's telling you the Greek he is talking about. The Greek Paul is talking about is the uncircumcision. Of who? The Jews, the Hellenists. Very important you see this. Very important. That's why in Romans, see, this is something. I want to show you this twist here. The book of Romans 10. The book of Romans 10. In verse 11. Look now. For the scripture saith, whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. So they'll tell you that whosoever shall believeth on him shall not be ashamed. So the whosoever is anybody. But it says, for the scripture saith whosoever. Paul says the scripture saith whosoever. Scripture is the Old Testament. The writing. Where is it written? Where is this written? Isaiah 28. Because it says so. Whosoever. Whosoever. Isaiah 28. Let's go to where this is written. Let's see if this whosoever is everybody according to the chapters and verses. Isaiah 28, verse 16. Therefore thus saith the Lord God, behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone. We're talking about Christ now, a sure foundation. Yes, sir. He that believeth is whosoever. Believeth shall not make haste. Look at this. If you believeth on this precious cornerstone out of Zion. It didn't say I lay in the nations. It says I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. He that believeth, whosoever believeth among Zion. This is what Paul knows. Paul knows this. Paul didn't have to write it the way the Christians wanted it. He was repeating scripture. He was writing what was written, and this is what was written. The only ones that would believe out of Zion. But he quotes this in Romans 10. Watch. Romans 10. All right. Verse 11. For the scripture saith, whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. It said, make haste in Isaiah 28:16. But this is what he was quoting. For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. There it is again. For the same Lord is over all, is rich. That's why when you see for the same Lord is over all, is rich unto all them that call upon him. The Jew and the Greek. Again, you would think that Greek was talking about him. White boy. No, that Greek is talking about the Hellenists, the uncircumcision. Never forget Colossians 3:11. The Greek is the uncircumcision. That's what you see. You don't see none Jew, none Israelite. Greek uncircumcision. So the Greek Paul is talking about is the uncircumcision of Israel scattered out there. That is who he's talking about. So think. I want to go back here. Because I think I did something I just now remembered it. Again, I want the top of Colossians 3:11. There is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision. So the Jew is circumcision, the Greek is uncircumcision. The Greek is the uncircumcision. That's who the Greek is. So we go back to Galatians. Because a whole lot of Caucasian pastors like to go here. Galatians 2:3. But neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was he a Hellenist or was he a white boy? You know it. You know who he was compelled to be circumcised. Because was compelled to be circumcised, was compelled to be uncircumcised. One who is not submitted to the Judean rite of circumcision, Gentiles, anybody. So Titus was a Gentile, but it was because of uncircumcision. He was an uncircumcised Jew born in another land. You got to have the history. You got to have the history. I can't sit here and tell you that, I could just make things say what I want. No. Titus, with Paul, being a Greek, you think it's an Edomite. No, that Greek was the uncircumcision of Israel. Was compelled to be circumcised. Because remember, who were they teaching circumcision to? Let's go back. Acts 21. In case everybody wasn't being circumcised. It was only, so you got to be able to paraphrase. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles. The only ones they were teaching circumcision to were the Jews among them, because there were uncircumcised Jews. Every nation was not taught circumcision. You weren't just going to come into our religion. You don't even belong here. Get out. That thou teachest all Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying they ought not to circumcise their children, neither walk after the customs. See, Paul was not teaching circumcision of the flesh, but the Jews were. They were teaching all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to be circumcised and keep Moses. Paul was not. And that is what the issue was. They were teaching circumcision to their own brethren who were uncircumcised due to Antiochus Epiphanes and the Grecian takeover. It's a history to this. It is a history to this. We clearly see that the Gentiles Paul was talking about was the uncircumcision, and Ephesians tells it easily. I love the way Paul writes it here. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, because that's who they were. The Gentiles were the uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. Hands. Gentile had its meanings according to the Bible. And what you see is Gentiles and uncircumcision. It's the same. It was the same. The Gentiles Paul is talking about is not any nation or anybody from any nation. The Gentiles he's talking about is the uncircumcision of Israel. It's been like that all the time. But the Christians lied and tried to include everybody. No. If you're fooled by that, you are. But that's the book has already declared to us what it has. The Gentiles in the flesh that hadn't been circumcised, those Jews that hadn't been circumcised in the flesh. Remember, wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh. Watch this. Romans 2. I hope you can see this. Romans 2. Verse 28. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. So there were Jews that were uncircumcised in their flesh. That's what this means. This isn't talking about no spiritual Jew. Anybody could become a Jew. No, he's talking about the Jews that had not been circumcised. Flesh. These Jews were not circumcised on their outer flesh. These Jews were not circumcised on their outer flesh. And once again, all who are not Jews and circumcised are comprised under the word goyim. So if you wasn't circumcised in the religion of the Jews, you were also a Gentile. This is what they hide, and for good reason. For he is not a Jew which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. So this is a Jew that was not circumcised in his flesh. A Jew that is not circumcised in his flesh, making him the uncircumcision. Back to Ephesians. Yep, Ephesians 2, verse 11. You're going to see the same thing. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision. Who were these men that were uncircumcised in their flesh? Those Jews. They were uncircumcised by that which is called circumcision. Those Jews that were in the flesh made by hand. So the uncircumcision in the flesh, those that were Gentiles in their flesh were the uncircumcision. Gentiles does not mean non-Jew, non-Israel. You keep seeing uncircumcision. Uncircumcision of who? The Jews, because Antiochus Epiphanes stopped it. Now when Israel was given liberty to go back out and at the time of Christ, right after Christ, they went out to teach all nations because they at least had the liberty to religion return. That was an agreement. See, when you're looking at this Bible, pay attention. Look at the Bible. Too many times, Book of Galatians 2, verse 7 and 8, one more time. Galatians 2, 7 and 8. Oh, verse 7 first. But contrariwise, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision, again, he's noting the uncircumcision was committed unto me, as the gospel of the circumcision was unto Peter. For he that wrought effectually in Peter to the apostleship of the circumcision in the flesh, the same was mighty in me toward the Gentiles. The Gentiles he's talking about is the uncircumcision in verse 7. We keep telling y'all, the uncircumcision is Gentiles. But the Christian will have you believe, no, it's non-Jew. That is a lie. Now, some of you may ask, why do they do that? Why do they count non-Jew before anything else? Because if any of us found out that Gentile also meant anybody that wasn't circumcised, and that the Jews were the uncircumcised, common sense would come to mind and say, okay, those were the Jews. Those were those people. Those were those Gentiles, excuse me. The uncircumcision, due to the fact Antiochus Epiphanes stopped their religion in the time of Daniel 8, and many of them were uncircumcised doing heathen practices. They were uncircumcised doing heathen practices. That's why, again, this one here, it's a hard time for the Christians to get past. You're going to see. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, this is the Jews. I will not have you ignorant, the brethren. Ye know that ye were Gentiles. How? How are they Gentiles? In their flesh, they were the uncircumcision. The brethren, his brethren, were Israelites. Romans 9, 3 and 4. You know that ye were Gentiles carried away into these dumb idols, even as ye were led. Gentiles. Those uncircumcised Jews, brethren. You know that you were Gentiles. They used to be. But now their hearts are circumcised in what? The law. See, Romans 10 again. Yeah, we're going to be done. Romans 10. See, this is where they get all this from about this and this and see, well, anybody that believes, the one understanding we got, for the scripture saith, whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. For there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. See, but you would think that Greek was who? A white man. No, the Greek was the uncircumcision. Colossians 3:11. That's all you have. You will not see non-Jew, non-Israelite, or nothing else. Uncircumcision is who the Greek was. The uncircumcision. Colossians 3:11. Boom. For the same Lord is over, or the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. All that call upon him. So the Jew and the Greek, those that call upon him. So let's go back and look. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. So if the Jew or the Greek call upon the name of the Lord, they shall be saved. If the Jew or the Greek, we got you here, Christians, because in Romans 10:13, he's quoting Joel 2:32. Oh my goodness, what is it going to say? Why is Paul for whosoever shall, he's quoting it. Romans 10:13 is another verse. Paul does not complete the verse, but he gives you the part he wants out. And the Romans would have known where to find this by chapter and verse. So when we go to Joel 2, verse 32. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Delivered is saved. This is what Paul is talking about. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord has said, and the remnant of who? Israel, whom the Lord shall call. So he's only calling Israel. He didn't say he was calling the nations. He said he was calling Israel. But look, whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. This is what Paul is talking about. This is what Paul quoted. This is where he came to. And believe it or not, we're going to see the same thing again. Watch this. Acts 2:21. And it shall come to pass when the sun and the moon goes to acting crazy before the great and notable day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Whosoever among Israel shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Like it says in Joel 2:32. It's repeated right here. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Ye men of Israel, hear these words. The Messiah of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourselves also knew. So the men of Israel were to hear the words of Joel. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Ye men of Israel, hear these words, because it says the same thing in Joel 2, verse 32. Now, when we get to Romans 10, verse 13, for whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Now that whosoever is anybody. The whosoever was from Israel in Joel 2:32 and Joel 2:21-22. Joel 2:32 and Acts 21:22. The whosoever was from Israel. But now the whosoever, because it's, remember, for there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. For the same Lord over all is rich upon all them that call upon him. Call upon them. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. But we read two verses that those that were calling on the name of the Lord to be saved was from Zion only, not other nations. But again, it says, for there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. For the same Lord over all is rich upon all that call upon him. Greek. And see, every time you see Greek, you think of the white man. That's what they want you to do. But no. You can't think of that. The Greek is the uncircumcision, mentioned in Colossians 3, verse 11. That's what the Greek is. So the Jew and to the uncircumcision, the uncircumcised Jew, for he is the same Lord over all, or the same, I keep reading that wrong. For the same Lord over all is rich upon all them that call upon him. The same Lord is over all that call, and is rich to them that call upon them. That's why Paul says, for whosoever of who? See, up here would be the Jew and the Greek. But what is that Greek? That Greek is the uncircumcision, Colossians 3, verse 11. That's who the Greek was. The Greek just wasn't any kind of people. It was the uncircumcision. That's what Paul was talking about. So it says, for there is no difference between the Jew and the uncircumcised Jew. That's all that is. He was a Greek. Paul should have already known, according to Romans 10:13, that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved was going to be from Zion. Joel 2:32, Acts 2:21-22. Ye men of Israel, hear these words. So this Greek up here had to be the uncircumcised Israelite they were bringing back to his religion by faith, not by sacrifice, not by circumcision, but by faith. It's very difficult to understand, hopefully, this game these Christians got, because they're pushing, they're coming out on TikTok. That's why we're back on TikTok, brothers and sisters. I was on TikTok, man. They're out here. They're quoting Galatians 3:28 and John 3:16 flooded. I'm talking about one after the next. I was scrolling up. I was like, oh, they want to play that game. Well, see, we got to get back on TikTok, brothers and sisters, and we hope you will join us. We're on TikTok. Just search us. We're going to be there. And then we're going to get back on Facebook as well. We've just been doing getting our YouTube page together, because that's difficult. You always want to try to do one platform before the others. But anyway, brothers and sisters, may your Sabbath be blessed. The rest of it anyway. And all praises to the Most High. All praises. I'm your host, the Apostle Reuben of IUPR Bible Radio, podcasting out of Little Rock, Arkansas, to you, true Israelites, the Word of God. You true saints. One love and peace, brothers and sisters. Just letting you see who the Greek truly was by chapter and verse, and sources that agreed with it 100%. One love, brothers and sisters. We'll be back with you later, Lord willing.